That's right, I know you.
Buyers. And we built out, we have a full presentation that we can show you guys. It has videos and interviews and things like that as well. But then the next question was, all right, so that's what works with millennials. What do we do for everyone else? And so this is the presentation for, it's a broad spectrum. We will go over millennials as well. But just to kind of talk about, you know, the different generations, what makes them tick, how you market to them, and then the nuances really within the communication. So when we're talking about the different generations, we're going to talk about the 4 different main generations that are currently in the housing market. So we're not really worrying about the kids right now, and anybody older than people born in the mid-20s aren't quite as relevant either, or there's not enough of them to really speak to in regards to marketing. So these are the 4 different generations, you know, silent generation, baby boomers, I'm sure you've heard a lot of, Generation X, and then we'll dive into millennials.
Is it the silent because most of them are dead right now?
You know, it's actually funny. So I was doing I did a search on that when I was putting this presentation together, is why are they called the silent generation? And while that's actually valid at this point in time, when they were originally named that, I didn't find a good answer other than it goes back to the story of when they grew up, kids were supposed to be seen and not heard. So stand back, I'll let you know when you can talk, but basically just don't touch anything. And so that's what they were called the silent generation, that's what they alluded to, but I wasn't able to find one definitive source on where that actual generation came from. So when we're talking about the home buyer, this was a Zillow search, or a Zillow thing that was sent out last year. They do a giant housing study every single year. You know, if you look at it, the numbers are usually fairly accurate, and this is from 2017. So when we're looking at that triangle over there on the corner, you know, there's a couple big things to notice. Number one, millennials are making a bigger and bigger chunk of the housing market. If you look at renters right now, 50% of all renters are millennials as well, so we'll dive into the millennial part as we go on. But you can just see where your clients are most likely going to be coming from. So if we total up millennials and Gen X, you know, you're talking about over 70% of the housing market right now. But with that being said, and we'll dive into kind of the pieces of the other generations as well, baby boomers have more discretionary income than any other generation out there too. So they're going to be different pieces and segments of the housing market also. It becomes fascinating. So let's dive in. We'll start with the old timers, the silent generation. So when we're talking about the silent generation, it's going to be the smallest segment of the population, but also the smallest segment of the housing market. But when we're talking about the silent generation, there are a couple of things that really stand out with them, and there are reasons that you know, that they act the way they do. And the big one is, you know, they were impacted by the Great Depression and World War II. So, you know, this is usually going to be your grandparents, you know, possibly your parents if they're a little bit older. But when you walk into a silent generation home, what do you see a lot of times? Phil. That may be a little bit excessive.
Maybe more like hoarding or things like that.
Stuff, right? Exactly. They don't want to throw anything away. You know, they have this fear that regardless of how stable you feel at that point in time, it can be taken away. And that's where, you know, especially the people that went through the Great Depression or even heard about it because they grew up just after that, is, you know, hey, it may feel really good right now, but this could be all ripped away. Everyone loses their job. You need to hold on to everything you have. So that kind of Scrooge hoarding mentality really does come in. And so when we're talking about, you know, how this works in with housing, you know, they're really wanting to seek value for their money. So when they're talking about, you know, what am I getting out of this? It's like, how does this build to my portfolio? If I'm selling, how is this going to sustain me moving forward? So it's going to be part of my overall financial plan. And then the other big thing about it though is when we're talking about the silent generation, this is a lot of times they're now giving up that family home or their independence to move into something either smaller, closer to the kids, potentially assisted living, places like that. And then that's where this part really comes into play. So they're a very proud generation at all, and they don't want to be looked at as somebody that's a dependent or somebody that is a burden on somebody else's lifestyle, because for the longest time they've always been able to take care of themselves. And so when you're having the conversations with the silent generation, what you really want to do is you want to talk about the lifestyle they're still going to be able to have. And a great way to really represent this is, you know, what do you see when you see drug commercials for, say, well, really anything that affects, like whether it be heart disease or whether it be, you know, and we're talking about pharmaceuticals, what are the older people always doing in those commercials?
Active lifestyle.
Walking.
Going to the park.
They're out playing, they're hanging out with their grandkids, yeah, they're out on vacation, so it's this whole thing of, you're not just going to be like, you know, holed up and not able to move. It's like, no, you're still going to be active, you're gonna go see your friends, you're gonna see your family. You're not a burden to anyone. You're gonna live the same lifestyle you've always lived. And so even when you're talking housing, you know, you wanna talk about, all right, this is going to put you closer to, you know, your family or the coffee shop or your favorite restaurant or your grocery stores. And so there is this whole experiential aspect that they want. And a lot of it does come down to freedom. They want to still be able to get around and feel like they don't need anyone in order to live their life and live their lifestyle. So it's a different conversation. You can work into the, you know, hey, this is care that you need, or these are things that you're going to need in your life, but you have to be gentle with that, and you have to be understanding where they're coming from, where they still want to feel like they can do everything on their own. So when we're talking about your calls to action, or trying to get them to do something in regard to action, or to move on with their house, or move on to that next level, is, you know, they're not going to be impulsive. This is something that, once again, they're looking at their entire life, they're looking at their portfolio. Oftentimes, even with this, you'll see where they're looking to, okay, what am I going to be able to pass down for kids, because they're looking at legacy. And so they want to make sure that they're not just giving away the farm. They want to feel like whatever it is that they're getting, that it's going to be something that will be lasting, and that they're maximizing the value. So they're going to be numbers oriented in a lot of cases. So you do have this fine line you're going to dance, where there is the experiential portion where you have to explain, you know, how the lifestyle is going to work and how they're going to fit into their new environment. But you also have to make sure that you're touching on, and this is how it, number one, sustains you for the rest of your life, and number two, allows your legacy to be what you want it to be. And so there's a different conversation that you have to dance around a little bit. But one of the things that's important with these guys, this is the era that grew up with radio, newspapers, flyers, all of your traditional marketing. When you think about the old time marketing, this is who it still works on. And I was actually listening to a webinar, it's been just a little while back, and there was a guy that works out of Florida, and as you know, there's a lot of retirees that go down to Florida, and he has 4 times better results using letters than he does with any other form of marketing. Because this group still goes down to their mailbox every single day, pulls out their mail, thumbs through it. If it's something that looks even semi-important, they'll open it up. If it looks somewhat personalized, they'll open it up, and they'll take the time to read it. You know, what do you guys do with your mail?
Rip it up.
Exactly.
I might get it every 4 days.
You go once or twice a week, you pull it out, you flip, throw the whole thing in either your shredder or recycle bin, right? This group, they have a little time. They're going to flip through each piece to see if anything is needed, like, is there a bill? Is there something I don't want to miss? Is there some letter from my friends? You know, what are those things? So the traditional, you know, even, you could probably even get, and this might be a little bit of a stretch, into things like Yellow Pages. It's the traditional forms that they've grown up with, because while they're starting to adopt some digital things, you know, a lot of them do have at least a cell phone, maybe not a smartphone, but even potentially smartphones. This is what they're used to. They're used to holding something, touching something, and having it that they can refer back to, so that they can refer back to it at a later time. Other things, when we're talking about nuances, if you're trying to get their attention, you're trying to market to an older group, you want bigger font. You know, they don't want to have to go search out their, you know, their glasses in order to be able to read this stuff. Make it easy, make it clear, make it concise. The other thing is they're expecting you to be a business person. So they want proper grammar, proper spelling, complete sentences. We're not talking emojis and like short code. You know, we actually want this to be a business transaction where you're showing your professionalism. Because while they can appreciate you as a person or a friend, they're looking for a trusted advisor that is coming in and going to treat them, you know, as a professional would, not their buddy. And then the other thing is they like traditionally one single image. They don't want a bunch of clutter that's messing stuff up. It's like, all right, what are you trying to say to me? Make it super clear, make the verbiage concise and short and large, and let me know immediately what I'm looking for. So not looking for a collage of different things, a bunch of photos, or distracting messaging. Make it really simple and concise. Once again, these guys are going to be a small segment of what most of you are probably marketing to, but there are different ways, and like I said, it's letters or postcards or different types of print marketing, there are still highly effective ways to target this specific demographic. So let's jump into the baby boomers. So baby boomers, up until recently, has been the largest generation in our country. They really have been fueling the economy because they made the most amount of money. They still are the generation that has the most disposable income because they've already gone through their peak earning years. A lot of them, when we're talking about housing and things, will probably actually have equity in their houses because they've lived there for a certain period of time, or they bought and sold multiple houses to where they've been able to build that up. And so with the baby boomers, we're really looking at it from a sense of, okay, these are now your move down buyers. These are the people that, they've shoved the kids out, they're finally starting to move to that next step in life. And when we're talking about baby boomers, a lot of what they've grown up with, and we'll kind of dive into these pieces a little bit, but they've been focusing on the hard work to the point of, and I see this with my dad, it was always, I'll do that when I retire. Right? How many of you guys have heard that out of either your parents or grandparents or something like that? It's not, you don't live life to the fullest now. You work hard, grind, and then when you retire, that's when you go have your fun. And so it's a different lifestyle. So when we're talking about what makes them tick and what we're going to look for when we're talking about housing, it's also experiential. But it's different. It's like, hey, I know you've been grinding and working, so what are the things that you really like to do? Let's find you a house that allows you to do this. So this could be second home in the desert. It could be single level that you don't have to keep up the yard so you can go travel. It can be closer to the kids and grandkids so you can go be part of the family. It could even be closer to all of their other friends that are now in a similar boat. It could be living on a golf course or something. But when we're talking about the experiential living of the baby boomers, now it's, all right, you put in your time, what's the next step? And they're still looking for, if we get into what they want, most of them are starting to retire, but they're still wanting that piece of community. So the kids are now gone. That's been a huge piece of life. What do you do now that you're individuals again? You've dedicated the last 20, 25, 30 years to bringing up other people. What do you do with yourself? And so there's a little bit of a void. So a lot of times when we're talking to the baby boomers about, what do they want to do next, it's, all right, I've got to figure out what I actually like to do again because I've been giving for so long that I almost forgot who I am. And so you want to paint this picture of, hanging out with friends and going places and once again, getting onto traveling or second homes or all of those things that you've been pushing off for the last 15 or 20 years. This is the group that can now do that. But they are looking for value. So with these guys, one of the big things you want to talk about, it's not just this is what your asset is, but I'm getting you 10% more than you would get somewhere else. Or I'm getting you a deal on this piece of property. Because bargain shopping is something that they've been privy to and that's been part of their world. So that's where you see that 28.9% of boomers say they only buy closing when it's on sale. They're trying to find the maximum bang for the buck to extend, in some cases, extend that retirement out longer, make their money last longer. And so when you're talking about, selling their property to then buy something else, it's, I'm going to give you a good deal on the sale and we're going to make sure we get you a good deal or a value on the back end of that. So find numbers, find percentages, find things that will show, what it is that you did in order to get them that discount off. And Groupon might be a little bit excessive, but think of it as, okay, they're looking for a Groupon on their house where they're getting some kind of value for this. They're also the generation that's most likely to haggle with you when they're trying to get a percentage off your commissions. So be prepared for that when you're walking into those conversations. They always are looking for a discount. So when we're talking about what they actually look for when they're going out and searching for homes or when they're looking at marketing, is they actually grew up in the age where newspaper, print, phone calls, all of that stuff was rather normal as well. But most baby boomers have adopted technology to an extent. We're even looking from a digital marketing standpoint. We're seeing more clicks from baby boomers on, say, Facebook ads than we are millennials. And we still get engagement, with Facebook and Instagram ads and things like that from younger generations. But this is the group that is, they're looking online. They do have smartphones for the most part. They have the, the ability to buy the latest and greatest toys. So they actually do want to, they want to be up with what's going on. And so, and they have the capacity and the ability to stay up to date with most of the different technologies. But when we're talking about how they want to get either important information or keep relationships going, they want face-to-face. So when we're talking about types of marketing, if you're using systems or tools or conversations, what ideally you want to do is you want to reach out to these people in a way that says, hey, I want to get together and sit down with you in a face-to-face way. So grab a coffee, grab a beer, grab lunch, go do something, have an activity, but get in front of them on a personal level, because that's what they see that actually builds the relationship. The other part of this is when you're talking about housing, you're talking about getting into the transactional portion of it. They want news to be delivered in person. They want to be able to look into your eye, see what's going on, what's happening, what's our game plan for what's next. But they want this to be a conversation in person. They don't want an email that says, hey, here's all the stuff that's going on, where then they have to interpret. They want you to be that professional that outlines and explains what's going on within their transaction. Also, because of all the things that happened in their lifetime, so most baby boomers, we're talking about post-World War II, going through Vietnam, social activism, there's a lot more value placed on who are you? Why do I want to work with you? Why do I connect? How do our values align? And so they want to get to know a little bit about you socially. I'm not saying you have to tell them all of your political and religious ideals and everything else, or lack thereof, whatever the case may be, but they want to know that you stand for something. And so have some sort of a premise of like, this is who I am, these are the pillars of why I do what I do, and this is how it benefits you, or this is how it aligns with what you're trying to accomplish in your life. And so be ready for them to ask things about like who you are, do you have a family, where did you grow up, where did you go to college. They're looking for all these pieces that they can actually relate to. So those are the reasons that they bring that stuff up. It's not just for the sake of conversation, they want to know who you are. There's actually value placed in that, not just, hey, let's just get some chit chat going and then move on to what's really important. They want to know those things. So when we get into Generation X, we've got a smaller demographic. So it's 65 million Americans right now, so it's a smaller demographic than both baby boomers and millennials. But the key on Generation X is Generation Xers are the people that are they're at the peak of income earning years. So they're the higher levels at their jobs. They've been an entrepreneur long enough that now business is rolling. So these are the move up buyers, or the people that are even just transitioning laterally into something else that they want. So a lot of cases, these are going to be buying the bigger houses. They're going to be buying the penthouses. They're going to be the ones that are, they've got multiple kids that are growing up, and so now they're buying a bigger house that can accommodate the multiple children, or whatever those things may be. But these are going to be your move up buyers. And what they're looking for is the Generation Xers grew up in kind of it's the punk generation. It's also kind of the rebel against what your parents did sort of generation. And so they do value having some sort of a diversity. We're welcoming, we're inclusive, we bring in everyone. So you see a lot of Generation Xers right now, and you'll see some of the millennials pushing into this too, but that's what's coming into, say, the close-in Northeast Portland, Southeast Portland, North of Portland, like those neighborhoods that all of a sudden went from like 400,000 to like 800,000. Those are Generation Xers who wanted to be part of this urban environment of inclusion, but also are now in income earning years where they can afford to go up to those higher price points. And so that's what's really driven those types of markets. When we're talking about what they do and who they are, most Generation Xers are using smartphones, laptops, computers. They're fairly tech savvy. So from a standpoint of reaching them, you can reach them with mostly just digital advertising. Mixing in print is something that can work, but they're going to be trending more toward the millennial generation of going to the mailbox less often, not reading letters, just recycling things, not reading newspapers quite as much, even though that's what they grew up with. And those forms will work at times, but they're migrating more and more and more toward the digital age. But they grew up in the analog age of mostly print, mostly even phone calls, TV, radio. So really with Generation Xers, pretty much all of the different technologies or marketing platforms are on limits or actually do work to some extent. So it's going to be, you have to get a little more micro-targeted with Generation Xers. And so, I know Jackson had mentioned that, we like to start audience message mechanism in regards to how we set up campaigns. So within this audience, it's like, all right, you know, it's not just Generation Xers, it's are they, you know, people in a certain neighborhood, are we targeting a certain income level, is it, you know, around a, you know, say like a school or something like that, so we figure out who that is, and then we get into, you know, what we want to say, and then we'll target a mechanism based on what's going on in that area. So like, is it an area where they have a really, like say Lake Oswego, that still has a lot of people that read the Lake Oswego newspaper? Or is it something where it's like, okay, we're just going to target Facebook ads because there's nothing, you know, there is no print or direct mail or anything like that. I mean, direct mail get everywhere, but there's not a dominant medium in the area. You know, we may get into other avenues to try to reach these guys. But they are a demographic that's constantly seeking information. So this is going to be one of your clients that comes up and they're like, all right, so I read that, you know, this is going on in the world. I heard about rates, I heard about the stock market, because they're keeping up on all of this stuff from a personal and professional level. But then they'll even get to, you know, oh, in the house down there, the blue one, I know it sold 6 months ago, and what about the gray one right over there? And they'll probably know their particular neighborhood as well or better than you will when you go walking into that listing appointment. They're going to have watched everything the Joneses have done. They're going to be seeking all of the greater market information as well as their hyper-local market information. So it's not purely data-driven, but you're going to have to know your stuff when you sit down with these guys, because they're going to have been reading, they're going to have talked to friends, they will have gone through and done their research before they sit down with you. And oftentimes, even when we see these guys selecting agents, you know, they'll have asked around a little bit to make sure that the referral source they're getting is what they're looking for and aligns with what they're trying to accomplish. And then they'll even do the research on you as the realtor. But the good news is, if you actually win them over, Generation Xers are a lot more brand loyal, much more toward the older generation than the newer one. It's not just the shiny new toy or the squirrel. It's like once you've won them over and proven that you will be a commodity for them that takes care of them, they will come back to you over and over and over again and become fantastic referral sources. So treat them like they're your golden geese that are going to bring you transactions over and over and over again through the year, if you treat them well and you make sure that they feel like they're getting out of it what they need. But when we're talking about, once again, the sales pitch and things like that, these are guys that traditionally, it's more about being informational and then becoming the filter and saying, hey, here's all the stuff that's going on in the world, here's what matters to you in our current situation, but making sure they're well informed, far more than trying to talk them into doing something they don't want to do. This is also an age, how many of you guys remember people actually knocking on your door trying to sell?
No.
A few of you, that you grew up with this, right? Like, I mean, I remember people even coming to my doors. Oddly enough, I've had a few come lately too. All of a sudden, it's like a new tactic that's coming back. But this is a generation that actually had people coming door to door and selling things, and you never wanted to get caught by that person, right? That person comes in, they come in your house, then you're screwed. Even like the magazine guy, you're like, damn it, this is going to be 45 minutes. So I either buy to get this guy out of here, or he's never leaving. And so they're like, they don't like to be sold. They want to buy. And you know, this is a consumer behavior that's starting to become more prevalent with everyone, but they want the information to where they feel like they're buying something. They don't want you talking into anything. So if you're trying to push them toward a direction and you're feeling resistance, you're better off to step back, try to figure out where that resistance is coming from before trying to push forward again. Because if you keep pushing and they're digging in their heels, it can become adversarial really quickly. And so now all of a sudden you don't have that person that's brand loyal and buying in. You have that person that's literally going to fight you tooth and nail all the way through the transaction. So really figure out why they're doing what they're doing. The other thing is, they are going to go do their research and they're going to look at testimonials and reviews. So this is the first group or demographic of people where, you know, they're going to go to your Zillow profile, or they're going to go to your Trulia or Facebook profile, and they're going to go, all right, what are the experiences that other people are having with this guy or gal? Like, what am I going to expect and what am I going to get when I work with them? So it's one of those things where you just have to kind of be everywhere with this group, unfortunately. They've done analog, they've done digital, they'll look for reviews, they're going to do their research, and then you have to come in and tell them what matters and what doesn't, and then establish your authority. So that's where, you know, when you get into trying to speak to Generation Xers, it's really everything. I mean, layers of marketing is more important with this demographic than anything else. And what I mean by layers of marketing is, for example, if you're trying to touch your sphere, and I can show you guys an example, you know, I can send it out, or I can have Jackson do it if you'd like, but you know, you send out a postcard, or you start running social ads. The next day you send out a postcard that has the same imagery and the same messaging. The next day you send out an email that has the same messaging and the same imagery. Then the last day, you keep it running, you have your social ads, and then you turn them off. So over a 4-day period, you're hitting them with social ads, you're hitting them with an email, and you're hitting them with print, to where everywhere they are, you're finding them, they're not going to miss that message. Then you do that, quarterly, bi-monthly, monthly, depending on how often you can actually get your marketing materials together or your content calendar put together, and that's how you'll reach them. So this is the group where you kind of have to hit them everywhere they are. And we'll get into millennials here in a second. And I want to touch, so there's another small little, it's kind of a subsect between millennials and Generation X called Zennials. And the reason this is important, so this is, there are people born between 77 and 83, and so, and this is actually my generation, so this is the generation that grew up as a kid with phone books, phones on the wall, landlines, answering machines where it actually was a little tape and a button you push, writing cursive, going through and having to turn in papers like double-spaced, handwritten. So that was your growing up years. Then you get to, high school, higher education, college, everything flipped to digital. The internet hit, now you're turning in papers using, computers and Word. Smartphones came along, and so this is the group or the subset that really straddles the line and understands everything analog, because that's what you grew up with as a kid, but everything you did higher education and in your working life is all digital. So with this little subsect, you really have to hit them everywhere they are and figure out kind of where they fall on the spectrum. And in the presentations I've done, it's kind of funny. I find it's almost half and half of the people that are like, I miss the good old days of when I was a kid, and you could actually handwrite something, and I didn't have to deal with smartphones, or I didn't have to deal with all this, the Facebook, all this stuff, and so you hear that side. And then you hear the other side, and it's like, ugh, if I never have to touch a pencil or a pen again, and if I only just do everything on my phone, and everything is digital, my life is fantastic. I'm looking for automation and technology. And a lot of these guys kind of straddle that fence, so you have to have a conversation of, all right, where do you fall on this spectrum? And how do you want to be communicated with? And that's really what it comes down to is how are you going to communicate back and forth with these clients? So, as I mentioned, those people they're kind of straddling the fence towards millennials. And millennials are the one that we're really seeing becoming more important in the housing market. Because when we're talking about housing, you saw on that second slide, it's basically 40% of all of our transactions are now millennials. And the reason millennials are important is there's a couple reasons. One, they're the biggest demographic in our entire country now. And the second one that's important is this one down here at the bottom. As of last year, they're the largest spenders in our economy. So it's no longer the kid that's, sitting in your basement, just kind of hanging out. These are people that actually have jobs. They're highly educated. This is actually the highest educated demographic in our economy. So most of them have gone to college. They're going to be, excuse me, they're going to be that group, and if you looked at that second slide also, the median home buyer is now 36. And if we're looking at what a millennial is, millennials are basically 20 to 36. So we're now like in the median home buyer is now that first year of millennials. So that transition is really happening in regards to new household formation, buying houses, who's going to be driving the housing market and economy. It's going to be this group. So there's a few funny little things about millennials that are important to note. One of them is, we get this common thing that's I actually found kind of funny, of calling it's the me-lennials, right? Because it's all about me. And so there's this individualism where it's, okay, I'm not like those people. That's kind of the thing that you get. It's like, I'm not like millennials. And it's like, they will value their friends and they'll value the people that are in their tight circle, but not the greater whole. Like, they don't want to be thought of as sheep. They're individual people that are working within the economy. But the bigger part of it is, they're 3 to 5 years later in life cycle than generations previously. So getting married later, starting homes, like going into new household formation later. And where this comes from is a couple things. Is number one, if you think of when millennials grew up, it was really right as that second recession hit in 2008. So a lot of these guys, that's what they grew up in. So they've hunkered down, they've learned, hey, have a couple of roommates, take your time. But it's a complete opposite paradigm from where the baby boomers are. It's, hey, you don't want to wait forever to go experience things. Experience life now. Like, how can you balance, experience in doing things as a person while you can and you're able, with still having something set up for the future? But the future's not quite as important. It's more about, all right, we'll get there when we get there. I'm going to make sure I'm living my life to the fullest. And where this really comes into play is, with millennials, it's experience over things. I don't need the super fancy house, I don't need the super fancy car, but I want to travel, I want to go places, I want to have fun with my friends. And when we're talking about housing, now it's about lifestyle even more so than it is, about what that box is. And the way that I like to think about it with millennials is it's kind of like your thought process with a hotel room in Vegas, right? It's, all right, that's the place I'm going to sleep, but what matters is how quickly can I get down to the food I want to eat, the drinks I want to have, the gambling you want to get to. It's just like, that's just a room. That's a place I go sleep, and then I'm back outside for the rest of my world. So in housing, it's, what can I walk to? Is it bars, restaurants, parks? Is it something that I'm 15 minutes from work instead of 45 minutes from work? Like, what is that experience like? They'll live in this place. And while the actual home is important to an extent, that's not always the number one priority. So it's more about everything that's around that box. When we're talking about marketing to millennials, we do want to go through, and this is where it's all digital. We're talking about live casting, we're talking about Facebook, Instagram. It's all of the places where they're going to put themselves out in a digital world. That's what live casting is. It's basically, millennials are the group that will tell you everything that's important to them in a public consumption way. So when you think about what people are posting on like a Facebook or an Instagram, really what that is that's telling them, these are the things I want to talk about with the general public. So if you think about that, and you're trying to relate to either your clients or people you're going to be working with, or even, people that are in your world, like, say there's somebody who's a past client or, they're a referral over to you, you go onto their Facebook page and you see kids and dogs and travel. Those are the 3 topics they want to talk about when they sit down with you. It basically gives you insight into, this is what's publicly available. We can chat about this all day long, and more importantly for you, you start that conversation up, you sit back and you just let them talk. Because these are the things that are important to them. So it gives you a little insight into the soul. They're also the generation that, they're not technology adopters, they're technology dependent. So this group basically grew up with technology. I look at it as, how many of you guys have seen like a 4 or 5-year-old play with an iPhone?
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? Like, you literally hand it to them, and in 7 seconds, they're whipping through all the apps, they figured out how to turn things on, they're going right to the game they want. I mean, it's insane, and they're like 3, And so this group isn't quite at that level, but they are technology dependent. They don't know how to go through. That's why you see the, kind of the head down. You're sitting in a coffee shop, and it's like there'll be 4 of them at a table, and everybody's just on their phone, and there's not a single word being spoken for 20 minutes. And so it's a different type of dependency. Like, while the other generations are out there and they're using their phone, they're using their technology as a tool, with millennials, it is their existence. Like, their whole world is living in that little box. And so the key to you as marketers are, how do you get into that little box, and how do you fit yourself into that world? And really, digital marketing is where it's at. So we get into the actual marketing that worked. Social is obviously a big piece. This is where there's the interaction going. As we see it continue to evolve with millennials, we're seeing Facebook is still a better driver of traffic if we're trying to get people to go to links or things like that. Even though everybody says they're getting off Facebook, the data shows otherwise. It's fairly stagnant. We're not seeing the same kind of growth, but everybody's still on Facebook. But if you're looking for engagement and you're looking for people to go and seek out your content and like and even create comments and things back and forth, we're seeing more of that with Instagram. And there are a couple of reasons we've seen that shift. One of them is we're all turning into 5-year-olds. We want pictures, not words, right? And so we go through it, it's like, Instagram's just all photos. I don't have to read anything, I can just look at my pictures and touch like a little monkey as I'm like scrolling through. And then the other part of it is, the election cycle that happened now a 1.5, 2 years ago created such a political environment on Facebook that people shifted en masse over to Instagram because it's fairly apolitical. You know, you'll still get some memes, you'll still get some imagery on there that is political in nature, but for the most part, the political discussions stay on Facebook. Kids, babies, food, dogs, mountains, travel, lives on Instagram. And so when you're looking for that escape out of your life, Instagram it is. Because it's not confrontational, there's not the commentary that runs along with it. It's just easy to look at, it's a quick view into somebody's world without having to dive very deep, it's purely a picture book. The other thing when we're talking about millennials is, you know, life casting is so huge. And that's where I was mentioning earlier, you know, it's basically, you know, life casting is that digital thing you put out into the world. And what you have to be careful with is, you know, you'll see with life casting, there are people that, you know, who they are online and who they are in person are very similar individuals. And then you'll see the other one where it's like the person they are online and the person they are in person are very different people. You know, it's like you got the superhero and the dumpster fire, right? They're both the same person, but they're not the same person. And so what you have to do is, even if you know those things that are going on in their world and going on in their life, unless they bring them up, those topics are off limit. What's on the table to talk about is what they're putting out there for the public to see, once again, unless they bring that up. And so what they're looking for with this, and what they're looking for with life casting in general, is they're looking for validation, or they're looking for engagement with the things they're doing. They're trying to find commonality based on what they're putting out in the world. So they're looking for you to come back and either give them kudos or to participate in that digital life. And so a lot of times it's not even about ads. It's like, you know, go into the social, like a couple things, comment on a couple things, even talk about, you know, when you were there last, where you have the shared experience that went along with them. That's what will keep them engaged and keep them coming back. The other thing is we're seeing more and more where you got personal touches are more important. And this is something that we're seeing kind of moving up the ladder as well toward even like the, you know, the baby boomers and silent generation and everything else, is that, you know, for the last 10 years, we'll say, if not even longer, what technology's been doing and marketing companies have been trying to do is they're trying to create automation that basically automates you out of the process. So it's more about, all right, just put people on a drip campaign, doesn't really even matter what it is, as long as they see their name in the inbox, right? That was kind of the philosophy for the last decade or so. Well, that's no longer working. We're starting to see where, you know, things like drip campaigns that are not relevant to their world are actually becoming a detriment. It's like, why are you spamming me, right? That's the mindset and the thought process. And then you get into even the way that this is executed, and you look at email specifically, you know, if you don't even open something enough times, you know, Google, I've seen it with Outlook, I've seen it with multiple different email platforms, they'll just automatically start filtering that stuff into junk, because it's like, well, that's come in 15 times and every time they've just deleted it, now that's filtered out and you won't even see it anymore, unless you go to your junk folder. And so it can actually hurt you as a marketing standpoint. So what we're looking for is fewer, higher quality personal touches. And we're even seeing things that work, if we are talking about automation, where it's a simple text type message, where instead of having some beautifully designed template with a header and a footer and all these images and it looks like a newsletter, now it's just like a simple little line that says, hey, haven't talked to you in a while, how are you? And your signature. You send it out to 100 people at a time, but it looks personal. Now you'll get open rates, you'll get response rates, you'll get people that think, oh, they actually care about me, I will engage with this, or I will get back to you, because they feel like it's you trying to engage with their world. And when we're talking about, you know, how to keep in touch, it's also the consumer-generated content. So, you know, the easiest way I can illustrate this is, and I see it all the time in the real estate space, is, you know, you see that the agent or the lender or whoever it may be, even the title person that says, oh, I'm so happy for Bob and Sue who just are closing on their first house, right? Has everybody seen that post at one point or another?
Annoying.
I mean, I'm sure you are happy for them, but after the 10th time it becomes somewhat disingenuous or unoriginal. So what you really want to do in those cases, and what we've seen work at a far higher level, is you say, hey, can I take a picture of you in front of your house, or in front of your, at the signing table, whatever it may be, and then you send it to them, and you let them post it. And let them tell their story of how this all came to be, and then if they'll tag you, fantastic, to get you involved. Otherwise, you just become their first cheerleader, and you're the first one to comment and say, hey, thank you so much for including me in this. I'm so excited about your journey. Now it's something where it's not about you, it's about them. And the more you can flip that on its head and be like, all right, this is about you, this is not about me, the more it's going to resonate and the more they're going to be apt to then refer you out to other people. So just flip everything you do. It's not establishing your value, it's, all right, what can I do for you? How can I make you feel better about what you're doing in your life? And more importantly, how can I give you content that you can then send out to your friends so you can do the brag? And that's what we're trying to accomplish. So with millennials, the couple of things that we really want to dive in on, because the reason that millennials are important outside of just the fact that they're a huge demographic in the housing market is all of these trends that we see in marketing, when it comes to communication, when it usually comes to housing, when it comes to even like social issues, it traditionally starts with the younger and it works its way up into the older generation. So a lot of what the millennials are expecting right now is what everyone's going to expect down the road. So it's just something that's worth adopting. But
I have a question about that because I mean, you're the expert, right? But I kind of see millennials very, very differently than this. Every millennial I've ever tried to work with in a real estate transaction, most of them don't have a credit card. They care more about the Gucci belt and the, going out to dinner. And most of them don't have credit cards and they have debt, school debt. It's very, very hard for them, most of them, to get even pre-approved. So I guess I'm wondering, is this real estate related? I mean, is there data there that proves that millennials are buying at a higher rate in real estate? I just feel like they're the opposite generation. They're more about renting, having fun, all this other stuff, and they don't, Todd knows, I've got tons of millennials who can never get qualified because they just haven't done the things their parents did.
Well, ask Brody. Brody,
Yeah,
how many of your friends have bought homes in the last, you've been out of school now for what, 2 years? How many of them have even considered buying a home?
Probably under 2%.
But factor into the age of
I
millennials,
was
it's
gonna
up
say,
to
that,
36
you
now.
have to look at the broad
So that's all of
range.
us,
So-
a lot of us in here.
So that's where the 3 to 5 years behind it becomes important. So for Brody's group, new household formation traditionally starts in that 27, 28 range. And by new household formation, I don't mean buying a house. I mean moving out of I've got 3 roommates or I'm still living with parents or something like that. So that usually starts 27, 28. Millennials are comprising roughly 50% of the rental market right now. So there's a ton of them that are renting. But when we're talking about the millennial generation in housing, a 36-year-old is the very top end of that. That's your median home buyer right now. So we're at the very front end of this bubble. So Brody and his friends, in that kind of age group, they're toward the lower end of that thing. So you give them another 5 years, now they're all of a sudden, there's, I would assume, a good chunk of them that will be looking.
So that's why I
It's a
guess
great
I'm
question,
wondering is
though,
if
Courtney. Great.
there's 5 years, we're talking about 5 years from now, that's a long-term investment in a millennial, does that mean you're just supposed to, just put out content all the time so that 5 years from now they go, oh yeah, I remember, I'm gonna use Brody.
Well, why
I'm gonna
not
use
hyper focus then on the millennial that is of that 27 and
I was
28
just
year
gonna
old?
say, I just hyper focus on 28 and up. That's what I would do. Because that's a life stage in general. Traditionally by then you've kind of figured out what you want to do in some regards with your career path and where you want to be. That's when you start putting down roots. There's a lot of stuff that happens, 27, 28 range in general. You still do see a lot of 27, 28-year-olds they're still out having fun, experiencing things, fine being solo, not needing marriage, not needing kids. But if you start with the top half of that millennial demographic, you're going to see a lot more that are starting to move that direction. I would say if you go on the bottom half, millennials start at the age of 20, they're not even out of college yet. And so that bottom half of the millennial bracket, you do have a long-term hold on that. So it's just a matter of if you know them, if they're family or friends or people that are of value, keep some sort of a relationship there, but I wouldn't focus there. I would focus on the upper half of the millennial demographic. But it really is, when it comes down to it, it's all about consistent communication, a lot of times on their terms, because it is like, you'll text them, they won't text you back. You send them a Facebook message and then all of a sudden they'll get right back to you. So it's figuring out what platform works for the millennials and just making sure that as you're going through and creating and establishing these relationships, you find ways to make it personal. Make them feel like they're actually getting something out of you and you actually care. there's all kinds of studies out there and things like that about even the younger generation. It's kind of a horrifying stat, but the fastest accelerating demographic of suicide victims and things like that is 13-year-old girls. And it's because while they're attached to hundreds of people all the time, they feel attached to no one. And so with the millennials, you know, this is a little bit older. Obviously, they're a little more balanced in life, or I would hope so. But a lot of them, while they have all of this life-casting, you know, superhero look and appeal to the outside eye or outside person, there's a lot of conflict going inside because it's very superficial. So find ways to try to get a little deeper, figure out who they are. But a lot of times it starts with engaging with that portion they're putting out, and then digging deeper and creating some sort of a personal relationship with them. But, you know, for you guys, they are going to become more important. We're right at the front end of this millennial generation, so it's going to be a bigger and bigger part as we move forward. There is money there, they're educated, they should be high-paying jobs, especially in the Portland market with all the tech around here. So it is a demographic worth focusing on. And if you guys want to, you know, go deeper into this, you know, talk about who your traditional audience is, who your sphere is, how you target different people, you can get with Jackson. We can always sit down, and you know, we're happy to help you guys try to structure out the way that we're going to roll out these types of campaigns. So I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
If you guys want to know more about millennials, you can buy me a beer anytime after work and we can sit down and talk about it.
Should we Facebook message you?
Establish
Yeah,
that
Todd just threw you right under the bus. Todd goes, I don't know, Brody. I don't know.
Everybody's
Hey, I'm gonna text you.
The thing is, we have to buy it.
There you go. Thank you very much, Aaron. That was a fantastic
Hey, I got
presentation.
one more for you real quick. This is Liza Wheeler. She's one of my escrow officers right next door.
Hey, how are you?
There's some big changes starting tomorrow that a lot of you guys need to be aware of regarding the FERPTA law. So I'll just let her.
Real quick, sorry I came in late. I'm a little under weather, so forgive me. Are you guys familiar with FERPTA at all?
Yes.
Okay, so the new form changed and, yes,